The Whispering Walls. The old Victorian house stood silently on the outskirts of town, its imposing presence casting long shadows in the fading twilight. Locals whispered about the place, calling it the Whispering Walls house. Its reputation was known far and wide, for it was a place where eerie whispers and sudden cold spots had sent shivers down the spines of those who dared to enter. Emily, a young and curious historian, had heard the tales of the house's strange occurrences for years. She was drawn to its enigmatic history, yearning to uncover the truth behind the legends. With determination burning in her heart, she decided to embark on a journey to unlock the secrets hidden within the walls of the Whispering Walls house. However, Emily knew that she couldn't do it alone. She sought the help of John, a local man who had always been skeptical of the supernatural, and Sarah, a sensitive medium whose connection to the spirit world was both a gift and a burden. As Emily, John, and Sarah arrived at the decrepit Victorian house, the air grew thick with anticipation. The ancient timbers creaked in response to their presence, and an eerie silence enveloped them like a heavy shroud. "Are you sure this is a good idea, Emily?" John asked, his voice filled with doubt. Emily nodded, her determination unwavering. "We need to understand the history of this house, John. It's not just about proving or disproving the supernatural. It's about uncovering a piece of our town's past." Sarah, who had already begun to sense the lingering spirits, nodded in agreement. "I can feel their presence here. They have stories to tell." Together, the three of them ventured deeper into the Whispering Walls house, armed with a sense of purpose and the anticipation of what they might discover. They entered a dimly lit parlor, where faded wallpaper peeled away from the walls, revealing glimpses of a time long past. As they explored, Emily's eyes fell upon an old, dusty bookshelf. She pulled a heavy tome from the shelf, and as she opened it, she found a hidden diary. Its pages, yellowed with age, contained the handwritten musings of a former resident. "This diary might hold the key to the house's secrets," Emily said, her excitement palpable. As Emily read the diary aloud, the very walls of the house seemed to respond. Faint whispers filled the air, and cold drafts swept through the room. The words on the pages told a haunting tale of love and loss, betrayal and heartache. Sarah's connection to the spirit world deepened as she felt the presence of the diary's author. "She's here," Sarah whispered, her voice quivering. "She wants us to know her story." With the diary as their guide, the trio continued their exploration of the house. Ghostly apparitions began to materialize, their spectral forms dancing on the edges of perception. They were trapped souls, forever tethered to the house by the weight of their unfinished business. As night fell and the moon cast an eerie glow through the decrepit windows, the three adventurers gathered in the parlor once more. Sarah prepared for a seance, seeking to make contact with the spirits that still linger. "I call upon the souls of this house," Sarah intoned, her voice carrying a haunting resonance. "Speak to us, reveal your stories, and find the peace you seek." As the seance began, the atmosphere in the room grew charged with energy. The spirits, long trapped in the shadows, responded to Sarah's call. Whispers grew into voices, and voices became cries of anguish and longing. One spirit, in particular, made itself known. It was the author of the diary, a woman named Amelia, who had been betrayed by the one she loved most. Her story, filled with tragedy and heartbreak, unfolded before them. Amelia's presence filled the room, her sorrow tangible. She had been wronged in life, her love and trust betrayed by a man who had once promised her the world. In her despair, she had taken her own life within the very walls of the house. As Amelia's story reached its heart-wrenching climax, the walls of the Whispering Walls house seemed to come alive. They whispered and moaned, as if they, too, grieved for the lost soul. Overwhelmed by the intensity of the seance, Sarah ended the connection with the spirits. The room fell silent once more, and the apparitions faded away. "We have heard their stories," Emily said, tears in her eyes. "Now we must ensure that they find the peace they seek." With the knowledge of the house's tragic past, Emily, John, and Sarah dedicated themselves to helping the trapped spirits move on. They researched the history of the house and discovered that it had been neglected and forgotten by time. Together, they worked to restore the Whispering Walls house, turning it into a place of remembrance and healing. As they did, the whispers and cold spots gradually faded away, replaced by an air of tranquility. In the end, the house's secrets were revealed, and the souls that had long been trapped within its walls found the peace they had yearned for. The Whispering Walls house was no longer a place of mystery and dread, but a testament to the power of understanding and compassion. shadow in the mirror. The old Victorian house loomed in the gloomy dusk, a silent sentinel of forgotten tales and whispered secrets. Its ornate architecture seemed to echo with the distant voices of generations long gone. Mark, a disbelieving teenager, had been sent to stay with his Aunt June in the house for the summer. He scoffed at the stories of supernatural occurrences that surrounded the ancient residence. Aunt June, a superstitious woman, had always held fast to the belief in the otherworldly. She had warned Mark about the peculiarities of the house since his arrival. "Be careful, Mark," she would say, her voice hushed with trepidation. "The mirror in the hallway has a history of its own. It can show you things you might not want to see." Mark paid little heed to his aunt's words. He considered himself a rational thinker, immune to the superstitious nonsense that plagued her thoughts. That was until he happened upon the mysterious mirror in the main hallway. The mirror was unlike any he had ever seen before. Its frame, ornately carved with intricate designs, seemed to pulse with an eerie energy. Mark approached it with a cocky smirk, curious to see what Aunt June had been so afraid of. As Mark gazed into the mirror, he noticed something strange. His reflection stared back at him, but it was not his own eyes that met his gaze. Instead, he saw a pair of dark, shadowy eyes, filled with a malevolent intensity. Startled, he blinked and stepped back. His reflection in the mirror returned to normal. He brushed it off as a trick of the light and dismissed it from his thoughts. Days passed, and Mark's initial encounter with the mirror faded into the recesses of his mind. But then, as he walked by the mirror one evening, it happened again. He saw the shadowy figure lurking in the glass, a sinister silhouette that seemed to watch his every move. Panic gripped Mark as he stumbled backward, his heart racing. He rushed to Aunt June, desperation in his voice. "Aunt June, something's wrong with that mirror. I keep seeing something in it." Aunt June's face paled as she met Mark's wide-eyed gaze. She had feared this moment would come, that the mirror's dark secret would reveal itself to her skeptical nephew. She led Mark back to the mirror, a sense of foreboding heavy in the air. "Look closely," she instructed him. Mark reluctantly turned his gaze toward the mirror once more. His reflection remained, but the shadowy figure had grown more distinct. It was a tall, gaunt figure with hollow eyes and long, bony fingers that reached out as if trying to break through the glass. Fear clawed at Mark's chest as he stumbled away from the mirror. "What is that thing, Aunt June? What's happening?" Aunt June's voice quivered as she explained the mirror's dark history. "It's a portal, Mark. A portal to a place where shadows and nightmares dwell. It can show you your deepest fears, your darkest secrets." As Mark listened to her words, he realized that he had unwittingly unleashed something malevolent. The shadowy figure in the mirror was growing stronger, its sinister presence seeping into the real world. Days turned into sleepless nights as Mark and Aunt June struggled to contain the terror that had been unleashed. They tried to cover the mirror, but it seemed to defy their efforts, always finding a way to reveal the shadow within. The situation grew worse with each passing day. The shadowy figure began to move beyond the confines of the mirror, casting eerie, elongated shadows throughout the house. Mark and Aunt June could hear its whispering voice, a chilling incantation that seemed to taunt them. In a final, desperate attempt to rid themselves of the malevolent force, Mark and Aunt June gathered around the mirror. With trembling hands, they chanted an incantation that Aunt June believed might banish the shadow back to where it came from. As they spoke the words, the mirror seemed to ripple and shudder. The shadowy figure writhed and contorted, letting out an otherworldly scream. It fought to maintain its presence, but the incantation grew stronger, pushing it back into the mirror. With a blinding flash of light, the mirror returned to normal, and the shadowy figure was imprisoned once more. Exhausted and relieved, Mark and Aunt June slumped to the floor, their ordeal finally over. Mark had learned a harsh lesson about the power of belief and the thin boundary between the rational and the supernatural. As he looked at the mirror one last time, he could almost swear he saw a hint of gratitude in his reflection's eyes. The old Victorian house stood silent once more, its shadows at rest. Mark had come to understand that some mysteries were best left untouched, and that the world was far stranger than he had ever imagined. The attic secrets. The Victorian house loomed tall and imposing, its time-worn facade hiding the secrets of generations gone by. Lisa and her cautious brother, David, had always been intrigued by the old family home, its history as intricate and mysterious as the labyrinthine attic it concealed. One gloomy afternoon, as rain tapped a melancholy rhythm on the attic windows, Lisa's curiosity finally got the better of her. David, we've never truly explored the attic, she mused, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Who knows what treasures it might hold? David hesitated, his cautious nature warning against meddling with the past. Lisa, you know Aunt Margaret said the attic was off limits. There's no telling what we might find up there. But Lisa was undeterred. She had always been drawn to the attic, an enigmatic sanctuary of forgotten belongings. Armed with a flashlight, she led the way up the creaking wooden stairs, David reluctantly following. The attic was a dimly lit expanse filled with dusty boxes, moth-eaten furniture, and a myriad of long-forgotten trinkets. As they cautiously ventured further into the space, Lisa's eyes fell upon an old, ornate wooden chest tucked away in a corner. With a sense of anticipation, Lisa carefully pried open the chest, revealing an array of tarnished heirlooms and ancient artifacts. Her fingers brushed against a delicate locket, its surface etched with intricate patterns. "Look at this, David," Lisa exclaimed, holding the locket up to the dim light. "It's exquisite. I wonder who it belonged to." David peered at the locket and noticed a faint inscription on its back. "It says Eleanor, 1892. Maybe it belonged to one of our ancestors." As Lisa admired the locket, a strange sensation washed over her. It was as though the attic had come to life, and she could almost hear the faint whispers of the past. She placed the locket around her neck, and the attic seemed to respond. Suddenly, the air grew icy, and the atmosphere thickened with tension. Lisa and David exchanged nervous glances as the attic transformed before their eyes. Ethereal images materialized around them, like fragments of a forgotten history. In one corner, a woman in a long, flowing gown stood, her eyes filled with longing. She reached out her hand as if searching for something that had been lost to time. In another, a child's laughter echoed, followed by an eerie silence. "What's happening, Lisa?" David whispered, his voice trembling. Lisa's eyes were fixed on the ghostly apparitions. "I think the locket. It's showing us the past." As the attic continued to unravel its secrets, Lisa and David bore witness to scenes from a bygone era. A family's joys and sorrows, their celebrations and heartaches, all played out in spectral visions. It was as if they had become spectators to the lives of those who had once inhabited the house. But as they delved deeper into the past, they uncovered a dark secret. A figure, shrouded in darkness, seemed to haunt the attic, lurking in the shadows. Its malevolent presence cast a pall over the once forgotten memories. Terrified, Lisa tried to remove the locket from her neck, but it clung to her like a vice. The attic's haunting scenes intensified, the malevolent figure drawing closer. David attempted to shield his sister from the advancing darkness, but it was no use. In a sudden, bone-chilling moment, the attic's windows slammed shut, plunging them into darkness. Lisa and David's frantic cries echoed through the attic as they struggled to escape its sinister clutches. Just when all hope seemed lost, a soft, ethereal voice filled the darkness. "Let go of the locket, child." Lisa hesitated, her fingers trembling as she clung to the accursed heirloom. The voice spoke again, gentler this time, filled with ancient wisdom. "Release it, and you shall be free." Summoning all her courage, Lisa tore the locket from her neck and hurled it across the attic. In an instant, the malevolent figure let out a haunting shriek and vanished, dispersing the spectral visions and releasing the attic from its oppressive hold. Lisa and David gasped for breath, their hearts pounding with relief. The attic returned to its dormant state, its secrets hidden once more. As they descended the attic stairs, Lisa and David shared a silent understanding of the past's power and the importance of knowing when to let go. The locket, now tainted with the memories of the attic, lay forgotten in a dark corner. The Victorian house held its secrets close, and Lisa and David had learned the high cost of uncovering them. They left the attic behind, its mysteries intact, and ventured back into the world, forever changed by their harrowing encounter with the past. Nightly visitors. The Victorian house stood imposing and silent, its time-worn walls concealing mysteries of countless nights. Among its chilling legends were tales of nocturnal hauntings that sent shivers down the spines of those who dared to cross its threshold. The bedrooms, in particular, bore witness to the inexplicable, their walls echoing with ghostly whispers and spectral apparitions. Helen, a brave soul with an insatiable curiosity, had heard of the house's eerie reputation. When she learned of a sleep study aiming to uncover the truth behind these nightly hauntings, she didn't hesitate to volunteer. Dr. Simmons, a skeptical sleep researcher, had spent years attempting to demystify the paranormal, and this study was his latest endeavor. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, ominous shadows across the Victorian house, Helen settled into her designated bedroom, heart pounding with anticipation. The room was dimly lit, adorned with antique furniture that had witnessed decades of restless nights. A single window framed the moonlit sky, its curtains swaying gently in the night breeze. Dr. Simmons, equipped with state-of-the-art monitoring equipment, took his seat in the adjacent room, ready to observe Helen's sleep patterns and any unusual occurrences. With the flick of a switch, he initiated the study, plunging Helen into darkness. The first night was uneventful. Helen's sleep was peaceful, her dreams untouched by the house's sinister reputation. Dr. Simmons monitored the data, his skepticism unwavering. However, as the study progressed, the nights took a chilling turn. Helen began to experience vivid, unsettling dreams. She would awaken in the dead of night, drenched in sweat, with the feeling that someone, or something, had been in the room with her. But there was never any evidence to support her claims. Dr. Simmons dismissed her experiences as the product of an overactive imagination. He analyzed the data and found no anomalies, attributing her nightmares to the eerie ambience of the house. But as the nights wore on, Helen's dreams grew darker and more sinister. She reported seeing shadowy figures at the foot of her bed, whispering malevolent secrets that sent shivers down her spine. The room's temperature dropped, and the air grew heavy with an unseen presence. Desperate for answers, Helen pleaded with Dr. Simmons to investigate the room during her nighttime episodes. Reluctantly, he agreed to monitor her on a particularly unsettling night. As Helen drifted into restless slumber, Dr. Simmons watched the monitors, his skepticism gradually eroding. The temperature in the room plummeted, and the eerie shadows seemed to twist and contort. Dr. Simmons' scientific resolve wavered as he witnessed the room's haunting transformation. Suddenly, Helen awoke with a blood-curdling scream. Dr. Simmons rushed into the room, his heart pounding, and was met with a scene from a nightmare. The room was filled with a ghostly mist, and the air was thick with a sense of malevolence. The antique furniture seemed to warp and shift, taking on grotesque forms. Helen pointed to the foot of her bed, her trembling finger indicating a shadowy figure that seemed to seep from the very walls. Its hollow eyes bore into their souls, and its spectral mouth opened, emitting a chilling, incomprehensible whisper. Dr. Simmons, paralyzed with fear, could only watch in horror as the apparition drew closer, its presence suffocating. It was as though the boundary between the waking world and the realm of the dead had blurred beyond recognition. With a sudden, spine-chilling realization, Dr. Simmons understood the truth. The house's nightly hauntings were not confined to the bedrooms. They had been studying the wrong subject all along. It wasn't Helen who was experiencing the terror, it was the house itself that was haunted. As the ghostly figure reached out toward them, its touch like ice against their skin, Helen and Dr. Simmons shared a desperate, unspoken understanding. They had ventured into a realm beyond their comprehension, where the line between dreams and reality had become irrevocably blurred. The study had unearthed a malevolent force that defied explanation, and it had taken up residence within the very walls of the Victorian house. With trembling hands, they reached for each other, the only anchors in the midst of a haunting that defied all reason. The nightmares continued to torment Helen and Dr. Simmons, night after night, as the house's dark secrets continued to unravel. The once skeptical researcher had become a witness to the inexplicable, forever haunted by the nightly visitors that lurked within the Victorian house's shadowy embrace. The unseen child. The Victorian house's garden had always held a sense of melancholic beauty, its sprawling landscape a testament to the passage of time. But amid its overgrown foliage and faded memories, there lingered a whispered secret, a tale that had woven its way into the fabric of the estate, a tale of a child's spirit who had never found peace. Alice had moved to the house with a heavy heart, her spirit burdened by the unbearable loss of her own child. She had hoped the change of scenery would offer solace, but instead, it brought an unexpected connection to the past. Tom, the compassionate gardener who tended to the estate, had sensed Alice's sorrow from the moment she arrived. He had heard the whispers of the garden, tales of the unseen child who wandered its paths, laughing and playing. Many believed the child's spirit had remained, unable to move on to the afterlife. One fateful day, as Alice wandered the garden, a sudden chill swept over her. She shivered, overcome by a feeling she couldn't explain, a presence, an innocence, and a longing for something she had thought lost forever. It was as if a small, unseen hand had reached out to her, trying to grasp her own. Tom watched from a distance, his heart heavy with empathy for the grieving mother. He had heard stories of the garden's whispers, but he had never witnessed its effects so profoundly. He approached Alice cautiously, not wanting to startle her. "Are you all right, ma'am?" Tom asked, his voice soft and filled with concern. Alice turned toward him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I felt something, Tom," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It was as if my child was here with me, if only for a moment." Tom nodded, understanding the depths of her grief. "Many believe that the spirit of a child still roams these gardens, ma'am," he explained gently. "Some say they've heard laughter and seen playful shadows at dusk." Alice clutched her chest, her heart aching with a mix of hope and despair. "Do you think, could it be my child?" Tom hesitated, knowing the fragility of the situation. "It's possible, ma'am," he replied. "Some spirits remain tethered to the places they loved most. Perhaps your child found solace here, as you have." Determined to uncover the truth, Alice and Tom began to spend more time in the garden. Alice brought cherished mementos of her lost child, setting them among the flowers and beneath the ancient trees. It was as if the garden responded to her presence, the whispers growing more pronounced. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the garden was bathed in twilight, Alice felt a presence beside her. She turned, her heart pounding, and gasped. Before her stood a fleeting silhouette, a childlike figure, bathed in soft, ethereal light. Tears filled Alice's eyes as she reached out to the unseen child. "Is it you?" she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. The child's form wavered but remained. There was a sense of longing and sorrow in its presence, a desire to communicate what words could not convey. Tom watched in awe, his belief in the garden's whispers confirmed. He knew he was witnessing something extraordinary, a mother reconnecting with her lost child, even if only in spirit. Days turned into weeks, and Alice and the unseen child developed a silent understanding. Through gestures and the language of the heart, they communicated their love and longing. The garden seemed to embrace them both, a place where the boundaries between the living and the dead blurred. One night, as Alice sat among the flowers, her heart heavy with the knowledge that her time in the garden was coming to an end, the unseen child approached her. With a tender touch, the child guided her toward a hidden corner of the garden, where a small, forgotten gravestone lay. Alice knelt beside it, her fingers tracing the engraved name, her child's name. Tears flowed freely as she realized that her lost child had been here all along, waiting for her to find this final piece of closure. Tom stood in respectful silence as Alice whispered her goodbyes and placed fresh flowers on the grave. The unseen child stood beside her, its presence comforting and reassuring. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Alice felt a profound sense of peace. She knew that her child's spirit had found solace in the garden, and she had found a connection to her beloved one that transcended the boundaries of life and death. Together, they watched the sunrise, the garden bathed in a golden glow, and for a brief, precious moment, Alice felt truly whole. The whispers of the garden had led her on a journey of healing and reconnection, a journey she would cherish for the rest of her days. The Cellar's Curse. The Victorian house stood as a solemn sentinel of time, its imposing facade casting long shadows over the surrounding landscape. For years, whispers of its haunting history had drawn countless thrill-seekers, but none had dared to descend into the depths of its ominous cellar until Derek, a daring YouTuber, decided to take on the challenge. Derek's YouTube channel thrived on adrenaline-pumping stunts and spine-chilling explorations, but this endeavor was different. The cellar had a sinister reputation. Legend had it that those who entered never returned quite the same, if at all. Maya, Derek's girlfriend, had pleaded with him not to go through with it. She had heard the unsettling stories, tales of unnatural cold, unearthly moans, and the curse that was said to linger in the darkness below. But Derek, eager to capture the next viral sensation, had dismissed her concerns. On a moonless night, with only the dim light of his camera to guide him, Derek descended the creaking wooden steps into the abyss. The air grew colder with each step, sending shivers down his spine. The cellar seemed to be alive, its walls pulsating with a malevolent energy. "Hey, guys, Derek here," he began, his voice trembling despite his best efforts to sound confident. "Tonight, we're going to explore the infamous cellar of the Victorian house. Some say it's cursed, but you know me, I don't believe in that stuff." As he ventured deeper into the cellar's inky blackness, the atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive. Shadows danced at the edge of his vision, and strange, guttural whispers echoed through the cold, damp air. Derek's bravado began to waver. Maya watched from a distance, a sense of foreboding gnawing at her. She knew the curse was real, and she feared for Derek's safety. Yet, she couldn't abandon him in his moment of recklessness. Derek's camera flickered, casting eerie shadows on the rough-hewn stone walls. He pressed on, determined to prove that the legends were nothing more than superstitious nonsense. But as he reached the center of the cellar, he noticed something. A small, ancient artifact sitting on an old wooden crate. He approached it cautiously, the camera's harsh glare revealing intricate carvings and symbols etched into the object's surface. It seemed to emanate a palpable malevolence, and Derek hesitated before picking it up. "This must be the source of the curse," Derek said, attempting to mask his unease. "Let's see what happens when we—" Before he could finish his sentence, the cellar's temperature plummeted, and a deafening shriek filled the air. The artifact began to vibrate violently in Derek's hand, and he dropped it, stumbling backward. The shadows that had been lurking at the edges of his vision suddenly converged, forming a monstrous, shifting mass that reached out for him. Derek's screams pierced the darkness as he desperately tried to escape, but the cellar seemed to have other plans. Maya, her heart pounding with fear, rushed down the stairs to rescue him. The chilling winds seemed to snatch her voice away as she called out to him. In the midst of Derek's frantic struggle, the cellar's curse revealed its true power. The artifact, imbued with centuries of malice, summoned forth nightmarish apparitions that clawed at Derek's sanity. Memories of past transgressions and the dark deeds committed in the house surged through his mind like a torrent. Maya finally reached the cellar's entrance, but she was met with an unsettling sight. The cellar had transformed into a twisted, otherworldly realm. The walls oozed with dark, viscous fluid, and grotesque figures writhed in the shadows. "Derek, we have to get out of here," she cried, her voice trembling with desperation. Derek, his face contorted with terror, nodded and scrambled toward her. But as they reached the staircase, the shadows surged forward, encircling them. The ground shook, and the walls seemed to close in, threatening to swallow them whole. In a final, desperate act, Maya snatched the cursed artifact from the ground and hurled it against the cellar's wall. A blinding flash of light engulfed them, and the cellar's curse let out a mournful wail before retreating into the shadows. When the light subsided, Maya and Derek found themselves outside, gasping for breath as they stared at the now quiet Victorian house. The cursed artifact lay shattered on the ground, its malevolent power finally broken. Derek, his bravado shattered, turned off his camera with trembling hands. The cellar's curse had exacted its toll, leaving scars on Derek's psyche that would never fade. He had learned the hard way that some legends were rooted in dark truths, and that not all curses were meant to be challenged. Maya held Derek close, grateful that they had escaped the cellar's clutches. Together, they walked away from the Victorian house, leaving behind a nightmare they would never forget, a nightmare that proved the cellar's curse was all too real. The Forgotten Room. The Victorian house had always intrigued Greg, the adventurous renovator, with its ornate architecture and enigmatic history. Rumors of hidden rooms and dark secrets had swirled around the imposing structure for years, but no one had dared to venture beyond its well-trodden paths. That was until Greg met Eliza, the local historian who held the key to unlocking the mansion's secrets. Eliza had dedicated her life to unraveling the mysteries of the old house, poring over dusty archives and poring through brittle documents. She had discovered hints of a forgotten room, a chamber that had been sealed away for decades, hidden from prying eyes. "Greg," she said with a gleam in her eye, "I think I've found it, a secret room in the Victorian house." Greg's heart quickened with excitement. The thought of uncovering hidden treasures or forgotten history sent shivers down his spine. He agreed to help Eliza locate the room, and together, armed with flashlights and determination, they embarked on their journey into the heart of the old mansion. As they explored the dimly lit hallways, their footsteps echoing in the silence, they followed Eliza's meticulous research. It led them to a concealed door, hidden behind layers of wallpaper and forgotten by time. Greg and Eliza exchanged a nervous glance, their anticipation mingled with a sense of foreboding. With trembling hands, Greg turned the creaking doorknob, revealing a room untouched by time. Dust particles danced in the air, disturbed by their intrusion. Antique furniture draped in white sheets stood as solemn sentinels, and the room's walls were adorned with faded portraits of people long gone. Eliza's fingers traced the ornate patterns of an antique rug as she whispered, "We've found it, the forgotten room." The air in the room seemed to thicken as Greg and Eliza delved further into their discovery. They began to sift through the room's contents, their hearts pounding with anticipation. One item, in particular, caught Eliza's eye, an old diary, its pages yellowed with age. Its leather cover bore the initials M.W. Greg watched as Eliza opened the diary with trembling hands, and together they began to read the words of Mary Whitmore, the mansion's former inhabitant. In the diary's pages, they uncovered a tragic tale of love and loss, of a forbidden romance that had defied societal norms. Mary's words painted a vivid picture of her clandestine relationship with a servant, Thomas, whose presence was erased from official records. As they read, the room seemed to come alive with echoes from the past. Faint whispers and distant laughter filled their ears, and they could almost see the ghostly figures of Mary and Thomas dancing together in the moonlit garden. But as they continued to read, the diary's entries took a darker turn. Mary's words grew increasingly desperate, detailing her growing fear of the house itself, which she believed to be cursed. She wrote of strange occurrences, of doors slamming shut on their own and ghostly apparitions that haunted her every waking moment. The room around them began to shift, its atmosphere growing oppressive. The temperature dropped, and Greg and Eliza exchanged nervous glances. They had stumbled upon a truth far more sinister than they could have imagined. Mary's diary revealed that the house had exacted a terrible price for her forbidden love. She wrote of a dark ritual she had performed to bind the spirits of her and Thomas to the house, hoping to be reunited in death. But instead, their restless spirits had become ensnared by the mansion's malevolent forces, condemned to haunt its halls for eternity. Greg and Eliza's hearts pounded as they realized the full extent of their discovery. The house had absorbed the anguish of the lovers and transformed it into a malevolent force, a curse that had seeped into every nook and cranny. The room seemed to close in around them, and the walls whispered secrets of betrayal and tragedy. Greg and Eliza could feel the weight of the past pressing down upon them, and their every breath seemed to echo with the sorrow of Mary and Thomas. In a desperate attempt to break the curse, they made their way back to the concealed door and left the forgotten room behind. But the chilling presence of the house lingered, its secrets now known to them. As they stepped out into the dimly lit hallway, Greg and Eliza knew that they had uncovered a truth that was better left forgotten. The Victorian house's dark past had been revealed, and the curse of forbidden love and betrayal would continue to haunt its halls, trapping the souls of Mary and Thomas for all eternity. The portrait's gaze. The Victorian house stood as a sentinel of the past, its grandeur and foreboding presence casting a long shadow over the main hallway. It was a place where time had etched its memories into the very walls, and secrets lay dormant in every corner. Rachel, an art student with an insatiable curiosity, had always been drawn to the house's enigmatic aura. Its aging beauty and the untold stories within its walls intrigued her. She was particularly drawn to a colossal portrait that hung in the main hallway, dominating the space with its unsettling gaze. The portrait was a masterpiece of eerie realism. The subject, a woman with raven black hair and piercing green eyes, seemed to leap from the canvas. Her gaze was intense, her lips curled into a secretive smile that sent shivers down Rachel's spine. It was as though the woman in the portrait knew something hidden, something forbidden. Rachel had come to visit the house frequently, often under the guise of admiring the artwork within. The caretaker, Mrs. Haversham, an elderly woman with wisps of gray hair and a stooped back, had noticed Rachel's fascination with the portrait. "Young lady," Mrs. Haversham said one day, her voice trembling with age, "that portrait holds a power you cannot fathom." Rachel, always skeptical of such claims, dismissed the caretaker's warning. To her, the portrait was a work of art, nothing more. Yet, as the days turned into weeks, Rachel's obsession grew. She spent hours studying the portrait, attempting to unravel the mystery within those penetrating green eyes. It was as if the woman in the painting beckoned to her, whispered secrets that only Rachel could hear. One fateful night, as Rachel stood alone in the main hallway, she felt a sudden chill in the air. The temperature plummeted, and the mansion's ancient timbers creaked as if in response to some unseen presence. She watched, mesmerized, as the woman's gaze seemed to intensify, the corners of her lips curling ever so slightly higher. Rachel's heart raced, but she couldn't tear her eyes away from the portrait. It was as if the woman was calling to her, drawing her deeper into the abyss of her secrets. The supernatural events only escalated from there. Shadows danced across the hallway. Whispering voices filled the air, and Rachel felt a presence beside her, an unseen hand brushing against her skin. Terror gripped her, and she stumbled back, gasping for breath. She couldn't deny it any longer. The portrait held a power beyond her comprehension. Desperate for answers, Rachel sought out Mrs. Haversham, who had seen this very same obsession play out before. "Young lady," the caretaker said solemnly, "the artist who painted that portrait was a man obsessed with dark forces. He used forbidden rituals to imbue the painting with a piece of his own soul, a soul tainted by his insatiable hunger for knowledge." Rachel listened in horrified fascination as Mrs. Haversham explained the artist's history. His obsession with the occult had led him down a treacherous path, one that had culminated in the creation of the portrait that now hung in the main hallway. "What can I do?" Rachel pleaded, her voice trembling. "There is only one way," Mrs. Haversham replied, her eyes filled with sadness. "You must destroy the portrait. Break the connection between it and the artist's malevolent soul." Rachel knew that this would be no easy task. The portrait held her in its thrall, and she could feel the artist's dark presence reaching out to her, drawing her ever closer to the abyss. With trembling hands, she retrieved a heavy candlestick holder from a nearby table. She took a deep breath, mustering all her courage, and swung it with all her might at the portrait. The glass shattered, the canvas tore, and a sickening wail filled the air. As the portrait crumbled, Rachel felt a wave of darkness wash over her, a surge of malevolent energy that threatened to consume her very soul. But she held firm, resisting the pull of the abyss. Finally, it was over. The portrait lay in tatters on the floor, its malevolent power shattered along with the glass. Rachel sank to her knees, gasping for breath, her heart pounding in her chest. Mrs. Haversham rushed to her side, her eyes filled with relief. "You've done it, my dear," she whispered. "You've broken the curse." The old house seemed to sigh in relief, its oppressive atmosphere lifting as the malevolent presence faded away. The power of the artist's dark soul had been vanquished, and the secrets of the portrait could torment them no longer. Rachel knew that she had narrowly escaped the clutches of madness, and as she gazed at the shattered remnants of the portrait, she couldn't help but wonder what other mysteries the old Victorian house held, waiting to be uncovered by those brave enough to seek the truth. Echoes in the hallway. The Victorian house, with its labyrinthine hallways and echoing chambers, had long been a source of fascination and dread for the townsfolk. Its long-forgotten history was buried in the walls, and whispers of supernatural phenomena had plagued its reputation for generations. Carl, a sound technician with a passion for the unexplained, decided it was time to uncover the house's mysteries. He enlisted the help of his girlfriend, Nina, who served as his dedicated assistant. Armed with state-of-the-art audio equipment, they ventured into the house one gloomy afternoon. The air was heavy with the weight of the past, and Carl could sense that the house held secrets just waiting to be revealed. The hallways stretched on endlessly, their ornate wallpaper peeling and the dim light casting eerie shadows. As Carl began to record the ambient sounds of the house, he couldn't help but notice the strange acoustics that made the hallway sound distorted and disorienting. "This place is like a maze," Nina whispered, her voice trembling. Carl nodded, his headphones securely in place. "That's precisely what I want to capture, the bizarre acoustics of these hallways." As they ventured deeper into the house, Carl's equipment picked up odd echoes and faint, distant voices. He couldn't make out the words, but they seemed to beckon from the past, an unintelligible conversation that reverberated through the walls. Hours passed as they continued their exploration, following the strange sounds that led them deeper into the house. The echoes grew louder, and Carl's determination to record them intensified. Finally, they reached the end of a particularly long hallway. The acoustics were at their most bizarre here, with sounds warping and distorting in strange and unsettling ways. Carl felt as if he were on the brink of a breakthrough. He positioned his microphone to capture the peculiar echoes while Nina watched, her unease growing. Suddenly, the echoing voices grew more distinct, as though approaching from the depths of time. "Who's there?" Carl called out, his voice echoing eerily down the hallway. A ghostly voice responded, its words clear and chilling. "Leave this place." Nina's eyes widened in terror, and she tugged at Carl's arm. "We should go, now." But Carl was undeterred. He believed that the house held answers, and he was determined to uncover them. Ignoring the warning, he continued recording. the ghostly voice growing louder and more menacing with each passing second. As the echoing voice intensified, a shadowy figure appeared at the far end of the hallway. It seemed to flicker and warp, as if struggling to maintain its form. Carl's heart raced, and a sense of dread washed over him. "We're not alone," Nina whispered, her voice trembling. The figure drew nearer, its form becoming more defined. It was a spectral presence, its features twisted in anguish. The echoing voice grew louder, a lamentation from beyond the grave. Carl finally snapped out of his trance, realizing the danger they were in. He grabbed Nina's hand, and they turned to flee down the hallway. But the echoes seemed to conspire against them, distorting their sense of direction and making it impossible to find the exit. Panic set in as they realized they were trapped in the house's labyrinthine hallways, pursued by the vengeful spirit. The echoing voice reverberated through the walls, its words a chilling reminder of the house's dark history. As they rounded a corner, they found themselves in a room unlike any they had seen before. The walls were covered in old photographs, each one depicting the house in various states of disrepair over the years. It was as though the room held a visual record of the house's decay. Carl and Nina's breaths came in ragged gasps as they scanned the room for an escape route. But the echoing voice was relentless, its presence growing ever closer. Desperation set in, and Carl raised his microphone one last time, hoping to capture any clue that might help them escape. As he did, the echoing voice seemed to merge with his equipment, its words chillingly clear. "Leave this place, or become a part of it." In that moment, Carl realized the truth. The house was a living entity, a sentient being that absorbed those who dared to enter. He had been drawn in by its mysteries, and now he was trapped, destined to become just another echo in its haunted halls. As the spectral figure closed in, their screams joined the chorus of voices that echoed through the hallways of the Victorian house, a chilling reminder of the relentless power of sound and the echoes of history that lingered in its shadowy depths. The final night, the Victorian house stood alone in the moonlight, its ornate facade silhouetted against the darkened sky. It had been the focal point of countless eerie tales, the center of fear and fascination for generations. Now, the time had come for its last night, for the demolition crews would arrive at dawn. Robert, a seasoned paranormal investigator, had assembled a team of experts and enthusiasts to spend one final night within the house's ominous walls. He believed that, on this night, they would experience the culmination of all its hauntings. The group gathered in the grand entrance hall, the air heavy with a sense of foreboding. The walls seemed to whisper the secrets of the past, and the creaking floorboards echoed with a mournful tune. "We've heard stories of this place for years," Robert said, his voice filled with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. "Tonight, we finally uncover the truth." As they ventured into the house's depths, they encountered eerie echoes from previous stories, the mannequins that seemed to move, the whispers in the mirror, the time-altering clocks, and the unending hallways. It was as though the house was replaying its greatest hits of horror. Nina, who had once accompanied Carl on an ill-fated recording expedition, shivered as they passed the eerie mirror. The reflection in the glass didn't match reality, showing them distorted images of their own fear-stricken faces. The clockmaker's ghostly figure appeared in the hallway, lamenting the relentless march of time. "Time is a curse," he intoned, his voice filled with sorrow. As the night wore on, the house's malevolent spirits grew bolder. Eerie mannequins silently danced in the moonlight, their lifeless eyes locked onto the intruders. Ghostly soldiers marched in formation, their spectral presence sending shivers down the investigators' spines. With each encounter, the group became more disoriented, their perceptions of reality warping under the house's sinister influence. Whispers echoed through the endless hallways, taunting them with secrets they couldn't decipher. Finally, they reached the house's attic, the source of countless chilling stories. It was a place that had hidden its darkest secrets for generations, and now it seemed eager to reveal them. Lisa and David, who had ventured into the attic in search of forgotten relics, trembled as they realized the attic had changed once more. The ghostly reenactments of the past played out before them, vivid and haunting. "We're trapped in the past," David whispered, his voice filled with dread. As they watched, the attic seemed to undergo a sudden transformation. The investigators felt themselves drawn into the ghostly scenes, becoming unwitting participants in the tragic stories of the house. Desperation set in as they struggled to break free from the attic's grasp. Their memories were rewritten, their lives entwined with the house's haunted history. Amidst the chaos, Robert managed to regain his senses. With a burst of determination, he confronted the house's malevolent spirits. "This ends tonight," he declared, his voice filled with authority. As he did, the house seemed to respond. The spirits of the mannequins, the soldiers, and the clockmaker appeared, surrounding Robert and the group. But something had changed. The spirits no longer seemed malevolent. Instead, they appeared sorrowful, as though bound by a curse they had no control over. Robert approached the spirits, a mixture of sympathy and resolve in his eyes. "We won't let this house claim any more victims," he said. With a final, lingering gaze, the spirits of the house seemed to accept their fate. Slowly, they began to fade away, their forms dissipating like mist in the morning sun. The investigators watched in astonishment as the house's ominous atmosphere lifted. The dark shadows that had plagued them for so long faded into the dawn, and the oppressive weight that had hung over the Victorian house began to lift. As the first rays of sunlight broke through the windows, the group made their way out of the house, their footsteps filled with a newfound lightness. The demolition crews were already arriving, and the fate of the house had been sealed. As they watched the house crumble to the ground, Robert and the others couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. They had witnessed the final night, the culmination of all the house's hauntings, and had managed to break the curse that had held it captive for so long. The Victorian house was no more, reduced to rubble and memories. It had been a place of terror and fascination, a source of countless stories and legends. But now, as the dust settled, it became a part of history, a house that had stood defiantly against the passage of time, a house that had finally found its peace.